infused purpose into all of creation. While in the modern worldview, if you notice, everything is denied except the empirical. Right? So it's really important to understand this is the asl, this is the principle upon which almost all other thought, every other thought that we're going to discuss, is its asl is mabni upon this. It's rooted within this very, not even epistemic, but a fact about reality. The fact about reality is it's just natural, right? And it needs to kind of fit within that area. If it doesn't, then we have a problem, right? So think of every other dimension or domain of thought to be attached back to this one fact, that for in Islam, it's all pivoting around Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, jalla thana'uhu wa azza dhikruh. While for the modern worldview, it pivots around one solid fact. The only fact of only matter to care for is that the natural world exists. That's it. Nothing else. Nothing else. Right? You're either agnostic about it or you full out deny it. It's one of the two. So the supernatural is denied. An eschaton is denied. A resurrection is denied. A true objective purpose for existence is denied. And so the only thing that's really real is the empirical or the natural world. So that's kind of like a summary for what we did last time. Let's move on into the next one here. Now we're going to be talking a little bit about epistemology. Now I'm going to run through the slide here, but then I'm going to open up the discourse into the effects of this type of epistemology, right? So let's take it one point at a time. In the Islamic worldview, the most certain, most real, most factual of all knowledge is the knowledge that is attained from wahi, from revelation, from the Quran and Sunnah. There is no other knowledge that is more certain in terms of how we look at the world than the Quran and Sunnah. That's how we make sense of knowledge. And what was epistemology? Can somebody remind me? Yes. Very good. How we know things. Let's get a little bit more technical today. The technical definition for epistemology is a justified true belief. What is it? It is a justified true belief. It needs to be justified somehow. It needs to be true, and it needs to be a belief. Right? Right? Which in Arabic we call ma'rifah or al-ilm. Al-ilm al-qat'i, conclusive knowledge. Right? So conclusive knowledge. And so that's the goal of epistemology, is to get us to al-ilm al-qat'i, real knowledge, right? Conclusive knowledge. For us, the Quran and Sunnah provides that in a very deeply structuring, formulating, creating manner. In the modern worldview, right off the bat, when it comes to knowing about something, divine knowledge has no space for it at all, period. So, it doesn't matter. You can be an atheist. You can be a Christian. You can be a Jew. You can be an agnostic. You can be a deist. You can be anything. But when it comes to real knowledge about the world, la. There's no space for revelation. This is why, what do they call Christians who want to use Bible to be more central in the way they see the world? They call them Bible-thumping Christians. They keep thumping the Bible, right? Well, the Bible says this, and the Bible says that. And there's lots of jokes about them, right? About the flat earthers are usually Bible readers, and so on and so forth. So even Christians, right-wing Christians, liberal Christians of the right wing, when I say liberal, I mean philosophically liberal. We'll get into that when we get to liberalism. But the point is, they believe, wahi, la. This is something it's very Protestant in its nature. It's Protestant religiosity. It needs to be private. It needs to be secularized. Religion is all about the spiritual and the personal. It's all about just the family. That's all. That's where religion is. It doesn't kind of leave those boundaries, those hudud of religion are set in place. So it's Protestant religiosity. What is it? It's Protestant Christianity. So yes, my religion might shape the way I experience God or I have a relationship to God. But when it comes to social policies, when it comes to politics, when it comes to education, especially later onwards, but yeah. The wahi, revelation, there is no space for it. There is no space for it. Okay. Moving to the second one, sense experience, which we call al-hiss. By the way, epistemology in Arabic, what's it called classically? Can somebody tell me? ايش؟ لا مش علم المعرفة. يا ممتاز سلمك الله. نظرية المعرفة. نظرية المعرفة is the more traditional manner in which we discuss epistemology. But in later times, scholars differentiate between modern epistemology and in between نظرية المعرفة. Why? Because نظرية المعرفة is encompassed within أصول الاستدلال, methodology of giving proof, or just generally are ways of ascertaining knowledge, ways of gaining knowledge. So usually where do we study this? We study this in usul al-fiqh. Usually where do we study these things? We study them in usul al-fiqh. Why? Because in usul al-fiqh we're being told how do we gain knowledge about the world and about the deen and how do we ascertain so on. So that's where we're going to study these things as well. And of course we also we open up to theology, to aqidah and so on and so forth, and we have these broader discussions in those areas as well. طيب, so for us, sense experience hiss is just as real for us. It holds a lot of weight. It's not that it holds any less weight, right? This is why we have principles such as the law of non-contradiction, right? Of عدم التناقض, right? The law of non-contradiction is a rational proof, and then it's exerted upon the senses, right? Likewise, senses give us knowledge as well, right? So like the idea that it's qat'i, that the sun will rise from the west or the east. Sure? خلاص, that's okay, just making sure. That it rises from the east and it sets in the west. طيب, ممتاز. How do we know this? Through al-hiss. How is it qat'i? Through al-hiss. Through sense experience, right? Likewise, sense experience is quite essential. In fact, I would say it's in the modern worldview, it's the most important. Because remember, if the natural world is all there is, then what's the most important way of interacting with the natural world? Through your senses, which is called sensorial experience. Sensorial experience or sensorial evidence, right? So the five senses, seeing, smelling. What are they? Seeing, smelling, touching, hearing, tasting. What else? You sure? Okay. So these are the five, and they hold quite a lot of weight. In fact, I would say they trump everything else, especially in later modernity. So late modernity is the only thing that holds any real weight. Do you have any science to back it? Why? Even psychology is supposed to be scientific when it's not. Everything is supposed to be scientific. The way we study human beings is supposed to be scientific when it's not. It's not a science. The way you study consciousness is supposed to be scientific. Why? What's the reason? It's because it all goes back to it being sensorial. And that's the only thing. Why? Because how do you interact with the natural world? Through your senses. So the only thing that holds a lot of weight in the way you interact with the world is through the senses. Right? Okay. Next up, we have aql, reason. Right? So for us, it's quite important to understand that we don't have a secular conception of aql. Yes, we have concepts of deen and dunya. We have concepts of all these things, but we don't have a secular concept of aql. And I'll get into it just a little bit today, inshallah. But why? For us, the ulama, the jumhur al-ulama, are of the opinion that the aql and the qalb are in the same place. The aql and the heart, the psycho-spiritual heart and the aql are the same according to a good majority of scholarship. The Hanabila and the Shafi'iyya, I believe the Malikiyya as well. They are the position that the aql and the qalb are the same. They're not separate. And we've discussed a little bit about this before, right? About how doubts, desires have direct impacts on your aql, your reasoning, right? You know, أفسد عقله ودينه. He ruined his aql in his religion, right? And then likewise, what would the Salaf they say? They would say, ذات عقل قليل الفقه. Right? This person has aql, he has no fiqh. Right? Why? He has no understanding. Right? And then they would say, يعني, if we just look at the discursive, the discussion in the Quran and Sunnah of the qalb, right? أفلا يسمعون أفلا يعقلون, right? And so on and so forth. These are not independent of the qalb. These are very much talking about the qalb. Right? Again, ayat al-summun bukmun umyun la yaqilun. Right? And then the ayat in Surah Al-Baqarah, the second juz, after the example of the Baqarah, what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say about كالحجارة أو أشد قسوة وإن من الحجارة ما يتفجر منه الأنهار وإن منها لما يشقق فيخرج منه الماء وإن منها لما يهبط من خشية الله. Right? Talking about the heart, right? And the states of the heart and its rigidity. So the aql and the heart, they're not separate in our worldview. They're very much the same. They are in sync with one another. So you can't talk about pure rationale independent of the qalb. And so that's why we say the psycho-spiritual qalb. We don't say the psychological. We don't differentiate between the spiritual and the psychological. It's not possible. Right? You're either a kafir or a Muslim. There's only two places in Islam. Right? There's no I'm just thinking in between. Right? Why? It's because the psycho-spiritual is one. They don't separate from one another. So that's why there's that dichotomy. Right? So, طيب. Now, in terms of aql, for us, we have a unique understanding of reason, but we do believe in reason. That's why we have badhiyat al-aql, we have daruriyat al-aql, we have self-evident truths. We have self-evident truths, which we call a priori truths, not Kantian a priori. You would study philosophy, not Kantian a priori, just a general a priori, as in before any reasoning, right? These things need to be accepted as musallamat. They need to be accepted as things that are understood to be acceptedly true. You need to accept them to be true. Right? Such as, let's give some examples. Do you believe that everybody in this room is a physical, external consciousness to yourself? You sure? Yeah. But what if you start doubting that? Then you're going to doubt everything. Do I exist? Is this just a matrix? Am I hooked up to some wires? And is this all just what's it called? An assimilation of a grand AI that's feeding it to me? Right? So you need to accept that there are other people outside of you, right? And that your consciousness is independent of these people's consciousness. What else? You need to believe in the laws of non-contradiction, right? That things that are, in essence, opposites cannot be present at the same time. Can you be alive and dead at the same time? It's not possible. You're either alive or you're dead, right? Things like that. So these are laws of non-contradiction. Likewise, for us in Islam, the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a self-evident truth. It's something that's more clearer than day. It's not something that we can even discuss. Right? It's not. And for us, it transcends revelation, because to believe in revelation, you need to believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It transcends just merely hiss and sense experience. It transcends reasoning. It transcends report. Because for us, it's the last part. It is the fitrah, right? It is innate to us, right? Like in the Islamic worldview, to be human is to accept God's existence, right? To be human is to accept God's existence. Then if it gets clouded, if the fitrah gets clouded by society, by desires, by doubts, blameworthy doubts, by, external ideologies, so on and so forth, by your parents even. If any of these come to then change you, the job of any sort of evidence is to uncloud your fitrah. It's to uncloud your fitrah. طيب. So in the modern worldview, reason also holds quite a lot of weight. It's not that it doesn't hold weight, it holds weight. Reason is quite essential. Yes. For us, anything that's self-evident is fitri. For us, like self-evident truths are part of our fitrah. They're not separate from it. So part of our fitrah is to know that, look, at a certain point, I know I exist. At a certain point, I know all these other people exist. At a certain point, I know to interact with the world. These things, like, nobody taught me. Nobody taught anybody these things. They're intuitive. Just like that for us, knowing Allah exists is intuitive. It's natural. It's fitri, right? Do you follow? So knowledge, so for us, ilm is knowing. It's knowledge and knowing, right? So ma'rifah is knowing. Ilm is knowledge, right? Generally speaking, this is how these words are used within our tradition, right? So ma'rifah is noesis. In English, it's called noesis, which is an experiential being existing something, right? So like to be able to experience Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. To be able to experience true connection with Allah in salah, right? So a salah that is not just of the body, but a salah of the heart, right? A dhikr that وَأَقِيمِ الصَّلَاةَ لِذِكْرِي, an established prayer for my remembrance. If real remembrance is not occurring, if noasis, if ma'rifah, dhikr, true ma'rifatullah is not occurring, then is this a iqamatul salah at-tamma? No, it's not. It's not a properly established prayer. It's a lacking prayer. Do you follow? Right? So for us, we don't, that's why in our tradition, and I hope we'll get there, so please remind me about the question. Somebody remind me about the correlation between ilm and amal. Okay, and then we'll get there, inshallah. Mumtaz, let's at least get through the graph, and then we'll further the discussion, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. So reason has a good position within modernity, but, and this is a huge but, okay? There was a war early on between two camps, the rationalists and the empiricists, okay? The empiricists were, to simplify, they were from Britain, okay? Well, they became known to be from Britain, the empiricists. The rationalists were from the continent of Europe, so France, Germany, so on. The empiricists gave more weight to rationale, reasoning. The empiricists gave more weight to the physical, the sensorial, the physical world, the natural of its study. We all know today that who won out? According to the way we experience the modern world, who won out? The empiricists. Right? The empiricists won out big time, right? Because they attributed empiricism to scientific knowledge. And the major, mujaddid imam of this philosophy, right? The main figure, his name was Bacon. Right? SubhanAllah, what a haram name. The Imam of Bacon. So this philosopher was like at the most essence of establishing a correlation in between empiricism and in between science and scientific evolution. Even though scientific, reform and so on and so forth was ongoing ever since the Enlightenment, ever since the beginning of the Enlightenment. Bacon comes and he establishes that the only way to make sense of the world is through sense experience. And if you can't sense experience it, if you can't give it to me on something that can be replicated in a scientific manner, then it's not real. And it's just sophistry. It's just safsata. It's just speculation. You're just speculating. I have an opinion, you have an opinion, we all have opinions. But what's real? What's real? That which is out there, which you can test and you can do. Anything other than that is not as real. So Bacon was like at the essence, at the core of attaching science to what's it called? Empiricism. Okay, Mumtaz, at this point, it's really important to recognize this fact that empiricism is, as leading empiricists like Dewey, they say that this means that the world, and these are his words, is cold, stupid, and dumb. The world is cold, stupid, and dumb. It's just a cold fact world. There's nothing out there that's alive. It's just dumb. It's just plain old material. That's all it is. Do you guys follow what I'm saying? Right. Now, here's the problem with attaching empiricism to science. Science is not plain old, stupid, dumb, cold facts. It's built off of theories, elaborate theories about the world. Right? It has elaborate theories about the world, notions of how to understand things, upon which you will then evaluate something else. So, just like how in the past when people looked out into the stars, and some people might have just seen rips in the sky when they saw the stars, and we see stars, okay? We see big hydrogen bombs going off, okay? These are based off of a theory. They're based off of a theory. It's not just cold, dumb, plain facts. They're not, right? I'll tell you why. Because we're trying to make sense of and give purpose to these things. We're trying to make sense of and give purpose to these things. So a phenomenal philosopher of ethics, of morality, his name is McIntyre. In his book, After Virtue, he gives a good example. He says, if I have a hammer, okay? If I have a hammer, and I can tell you the dimensions of the hammer, I can tell you what material it's made of, I can tell you the intricate details of how it was made, I can give you all of that. But I can't tell you if it's a good or a bad hammer. I can't tell you if it's a good or bad hammer. For that, I would need to know its purpose. For that, I would need to know its purpose. Do you guys follow? Right? Likewise, you can't say that, look, the human being, we can study its anatomy, its physiology, its secular psychology, whatever that means, right? And I can tell you about man. You can't really tell me anything unless you're presupposing a purpose, some sort of purpose. Even if that means finding your own, you're positing a sense of telos, of teleology, right? You can't make sense of anything according to empiricism. It's just plain dumb old facts. As if facts exist without a way to understand them. Do you guys follow? Again, you need a worldview to make sense of the world. Whether you like it or you don't, you have a worldview. Right? So that's one dimension of the problem with empiricism, which is it presupposes that we can understand the world for what it is without purpose. That doesn't make any sense. What is the world then? And how do we understand it? How do we make sense of it then? Right? That's like me saying, I can tell you about a car, I can tell you its intricate details, but I don't know where to drive it to. Okay, what was the point of the car? What was the point of the car if you don't know where to drive it to? Or if you don't even know if it's supposed to be driven? Like, I'll figure it out, I'll push the pedal, I'll do this, I'll do that. By that time, you're going to break the car most probably. Right? Because the car doesn't have a purpose. Right? It doesn't have a reasoning. And who on earth would build something without reason? Look at the language we're using. We're going back to a language of religion. Because a language is built off of religion. Language is power. Right? And so restructuring language is a huge part of modernity. It's a huge part of feminism. It's a huge part of postmodernism. Right? Because language contains meaning structures. And then if you get rid of those or you change the language, you've changed the structures and the meanings. Right? Okay, so that's one issue, which is the issue of empiricism. The other issue here that we face is the issue of power. The issue of power. Right? The way we perceive secular, scientific, empirical knowledge is with the sense that it's neutral. Right? Technology, mashallah, neutral technology. Use it, benefit from it, don't benefit from it. Haram, halal, it's okay. Right? But that's not true. Because anything that is built is built with a purpose. And that purpose contains power. And in a world that is devoid of real ethical meaning, the only reason to know something is to gain something. And what are you gaining? You are gaining material. What are you gaining? You are gaining material value. And if you're gaining material value, then what is that? That is just power. That is just power. All knowledge today has been restructured in a dynamic of power. Right? Let's give some examples. When we study geography, ecology, saving the planet, amazing. Why are we already positing before this that the only reason we're doing this is because there's a problem, we need to fix it? Or else, if it wasn't, we could have just carried on with doing what we did. Let me give you a simple example. What's the phrase? Knowledge is power. It's not enlightenment. It's not closeness to God. It's not worship. It's not ethical. It's not moral. It's power. Right? And so today, what did we do? We've divorced economics from ethics. We've divorced economics from ethics. What was riba first called in English? Usury. Because you were using in a haram manner. It's prohibited. Both in all three religions that were sent down by God. Christianity as well, prohibited usury. The church, prohibited usury. What do we call it today? Interest. In whose interest? The interest of the king. Do you follow? So it was in the interest of the king to develop a system in which he can start gaining more money to maintain bigger armies, to then deploy them and to create the modern nation state. Okay? So notice the word structure here. Interest, in whose interest? The king's. For what end? Power. You follow? And then what happens? Economy becomes something that is separate from ethics. Ethics, listen, you deal with your ethical questions here. This is the real world. Here's the real economy. This is what we're dealing with. Right? It's as if your actions within the economic, financial world have nothing to do with the ethical. And it's all about power. The more money you have, the stronger economy you have, the more influence you can maintain. The more you can do. Right? And the list can go on, even history. I know this is going a little bit deep. Please bear with me, okay? Tariq itself is not neutral in modernity. Modernity has a certain set of values about seeing the world, separating material from ethical, separating actions from morals, and studying them in that manner. So what do? They go back into history and they say, well, you know, this happened, but the real reason was because of this material reason. The real reason was because they wanted to get this done. The real reason, why the Prophet ﷺ went on all the ghazawat was not because he wanted to get close to Allah, because this is the duty that he was bestowed with, but rather it was for military political gain, power. Are you guys understanding? So it's a rereading of history with power. This is the exact same reasons why they justified colonialism and Orientalism. Orientalism is a study of power, structures on the inferior, barbaric races of Islam and others. And they read history through those lenses. The greatest Orientalists were called in for ethnic cleansings and genocides in history. The biggest names that we have in Orientalism were the biggest players in ethnic genocide and cleansing. Right? So colonialism, the study of the Orient, or Orientalism, and history, they all very much have to do with power being knowledge. Right? So knowledge is not neutral. Secular knowledge is very much driven politically. Whether you look at it from history, whether you look at it from economics, whether you look at it from any other field, even science. Why do we have certain pushes within technology, within physics, within other areas? Why is it that in modern history, right, that the biggest discoveries of science are always attached to war? Why is it that the biggest discoveries, the car, the nuclear bomb, planes, modern planes as we know them, engine planes, all of them are attached to war? Because the knowledge that's perceived or gained here is pushed by power. Right? This is very different than our understanding of knowledge. Knowledge in the Islamic lens is intrinsically ethical. It's moral. Right? That's why you have haram knowledge, and that's why you have wajib knowledge, and that's why you have mubah knowledge, and that's why you have makruh knowledge. It's not all the same, right? It depends on its ethical underpinnings, right? That's why the Prophet said, Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min ilmin la yunfa'. Ya Allah, I seek refuge in you from knowledge that does not benefit, right? So, and that's why for us, we don't have this idea of knowledge being separate from action. Today, people do PhDs, postdoctorates on a topic. It's a very niche topic about the history of China in China. Yeah, China as in like the China from China. Right? What's the reason? I don't know. There's no intent, there's no reason, there's no niyyah involved here. Right? That's why in Islam, Iman is qawlun wa amalun wa i'tiqad. It's belief, action, and declaration. It's all three. We don't differentiate between ilm and amal. We don't differentiate between ilm and amal. Real ilm is that which you acted upon. And what you acted upon is what Allah will judge you upon. And it needs to be morally correct. That means it needs to be under the guidelines of the Sharia of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whether that be the actions of the heart, jealousy, love, hatred, or whether that be actions of the limbs and the tongue. They're all underneath the rule of God. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent the last Nabi, the last prophet, the universal prophet for all of mankind, Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, to conquer the hearts before conquering the lands. Right? So if we end up saying that, listen, knowledge can be sought as recreation, as that which is, separate from my action, then this is not seen to be real knowledge in Islam. Right? What's the famous saying of Umar radiallahu anh? When he asked Sa'ad, he said, Ya Sa'ad, mal ilm? He asked Sa'ad, he said, Sa'ad, what is knowledge? Sa'ad said, Al-ilmu ma yakunu fi sadrik. He said, ilm is that which is in your chest. He said, La ya Sa'ad, al-ilm ma yadkhulu ma'aka fi qabrik. Ilm is that which will enter with you into the grave. Allahumma arina al-haqqa haqqan. Ya Allah, show us truth for truth. Warzuqna ittiba'a. And allow us to follow it. Wa arina batila batilan. And allow us to see falsehood for what it is, false. Warzuqna ijtinaba. And allow us to abstain from it. Right? And wherever you see the ayat about إِنَّمَا يَخْشَى اللَّهَ, what's the ayah? مِنْ عِبَادِهِ الْعُلَمَاء. That who fears Allah truly? His ulama, those who have knowledge. وَأَطِيعُوا اللَّهَ وَأَطِيعُوا الرَّسُولِ وَأُولِي الْأَمْرِ مِنْكُمْ. And obey Allah and His Messenger and those who have amr, authority, sovereignty. Where does this authority come from? Is there any authority separate from Allah? No. It's the authority granted through the knowledge of the Sharia. This is why the vast majority of the Mufassirin, they do tafsir of this ayah as ulama. Right. So this idea of knowledge being power, for us, the only power is taqarrub ila Allah. This is why in the entire history of Islam, there hasn't been a single sultan, a single amir that has said, you know what, I'm going to come in, scrap the Sharia. I'm going to bring my own system. Completely mine. Nobody's ever done that. Because everybody recognizes that authority, knowledge, power is for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we are merely His khulafa. We are merely His stewards. Right? Okay, so I wanted to outline here, because I don't think I'll have time to get into this way, but inshallah when we're studying a bit more about secularism, we'll be getting even a little bit deeper into these structures and reasonings and of life that you find there. Inshallah, and maybe in next class when we talk a little bit about anthropology. But these 2 points, that empiricism does not lead to any sort of collective knowing about anything. You can't have collective knowing through empiricism. Even science itself is built off of things that you believe from before, and you expect them to, what do you have? You have a hypothesis, right? That's how modern science works, right? You have a hypothesis, and then you think it. In fact, not only do you have a hypothesis, but, and I apologize, I said that this course was going to be a little bit more advanced, right? But within the philosophy of science, right, not only is it hypothesis, thesis, and your results, but it's the culture of science, the paradigm of science in which it functions. Right? It's called the discursive grammar of science. Right? It's not a language without grammar, right? There must be some rules that regulate it. And those are what make the language, right? So, does the language come first or do the rules come first? The language comes first. And there's rules that are set within that language that then situate it. They make a culture. So this is the discursive grammar we're talking about, right? Likewise, in society, right, you have discursive grammar. In science, you have discursive grammar. These are called paradigms. Right? I think famous da'i online, he has a very nice example. I can't forget this one. It's Ahmed Sabur, because he does the philosophy of science stuff. I remember this. I cannot forget it. Right? It's a beautiful one. He says, imagine if you have a roommate, okay, and you believe that he's a student like yourself, okay. So anything you see about him, he's coming home late. Why is he coming home late? Must have had an exam. Must have been at his friend's house studying. Must have been at the library. He has new shoes. Oh mashallah, his mother bought him new shoes. Okay? Something like that. Brand new Nikes. Whatever else. So all this information, this dumb, cold information about the world, what are you interpreting it through? This paradigm, this discursive grammar, this understanding that you have about this person. Okay? All of a sudden, one day you figure out that he's a drug lord. Okay? Khalas. Every fact you knew about him is gone down the drain. You have to reinterpret everything. His coming home late, he most probably selling drugs. He had new shoes because he was selling drugs. Right? Everything now has changed. Right? It's because it's set within a paradigm. Right? And once the paradigm shifts, the way you interpret and understand things also shifts. Right? So again, nothing is dumb, cold, and blind. It's all built off of your beliefs, your predisposed notions and understandings. Right? And especially about politics, society, ethics, all these things fit within such ideas and understandings, within such paradigms, within such discursive grammars. Right? These are like things that are unsaid, untold. They just accepted. They're part of the way you kind of interact. They're your worldview. Do you guys follow? Right. So those 2 points, I would like you guys to understand. These are applicable to psychology. In psychology, what do they say? We have a therapist right here. They say that you're coming from a neutral position where it's as much as possible you're trying to self-guide the person. Right? What's the technical term again? Client-led or self-guided or client-led counseling. Right? But in reality, what are you doing? You're exerting pressure in certain ways for them to come out with certain outcomes. It's a power dynamic. It's an ethical dynamic. It's a moral dynamic. And who gets to decide? You. About what ethical values you want to give them. You know, I know brothers who say, literally, they went to somebody who was a religious person for counseling. Religious. And by the end of it, they say, maybe you need to go date. Because that's the solution for your problems. Okay. Hold on. How? Because that was the moral decision as the priest, as the secular pastor that they made. We'll get into psychology later. But the point I'm trying to say here is, look at the power dynamics. It's not just dumb science. It's not, no, this is your pastor, this is your imam that you're sitting with. And you're taking what they're saying like wahi. And they're shaping the way you think and see the world. This is wahi. And all their training is secular kufr, atheism. That's their training. Their training is kufr. It's secular. You know? Likewise sociology, likewise history, likewise economics, likewise any field of study built within modernity is built with these structures. It's not neutral. It's not neutral. It's very much set against you and your understandings. But if only you were to see. Right? You can't say, Shabas, acha beta, you went to school, you get good degree, but my son is atheist now. My son don't want to marry anymore. My son wants a white girlfriend. Well, you know why? It's because he's been fed in this entire system. But you don't want to see it. Because we're very educated, mashallah. You know, we came to the first world for this reason. First world. Look at the wording and the thinking here. Right? That's the point of the course. Point of the course is the only way to really find any hope is through going back to the Quran and Sunnah and the tradition correctly. And not getting bogged down in any of this filth. Because that's what it is. It's just filth. Right? It's just kufr. It's the ilm of kufr. Right? But you need to be able to recognize that. Right? Okay. Let's finish up, inshallah. So after reason, you said they have a secular reasoning, while we have a very much Islamically oriented reasoning. Now we come to report or akhbar. Right? For us, a khabar holds a lot of weight because the Quran is to be understood through. It's a khabar. The Sunnah is a khabar. The khabar of the Quran is from Allah to angel Jibreel to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Sunnah is the same from Allah to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam to the Sahaba to us. Right? So on. In early modernity, reports did not hold any conceptual centrality. Even today, they don't hold any conceptual centrality. They try to say that reports, what are these? You don't really need them anymore. This is just stories. They're bedtime stories. The stories of civilizations. And we don't have any use of them. But in reality, their entire system is built off of reports. Anybody who's studied any science never goes in to test every theory. They don't even go in to test a single theory. You're not going in there, doing nuclear fission, are you? Right? You're not going in there, studying how to replicate the finding of each element in the periodic table. You're taking them for what they are. This is all khabar. This is all transmission of knowledge. Right? None of it is empirical. None of it is empirical. It's all just built off of khabar. So they are reporting to you their akhbar. Right? Their akhbar. While for us, we have our khabar. And you know what? SubhanAllah, in the past 10, 15 years, they've had to re-evaluate and catch up to something that we've had for 1,400 years plus, which is the system of authenticating reports. We have Mustalah al-Hadith, we have Ilal, we have Tawatur, we have all these sciences that are in such depth, wallahi, they're beyond. Sometimes, like what was it said about Ali al-Madini? That he was a sahir, he was a magician. Why? Because he knew Ilal, you could just hear Hadith, he'd say off the bat, this one's authentic, this one's not. And if you asked him how, he couldn't tell you because it was so deeply ingrained as to the methodology of how to decipher, right? Through a scientific method. Yes, scientific. Here. Okay. And so in the past couple of years, they've philosophically speaking, they've had to really ramp up their study of reports. And subhanAllah, they come to the same conclusions that we came to 1,400 years ago, right? That we've been practicing for that long. Our entire knowledge is based off of that. And we're figuring that out now, right? For like courts and testimonies and other things, right? Last part, and then I'll take questions, inshallah. In terms of, for us, we have the fitrah, we have the spiritual intuition, which is called hads, right? So part of our fitrah is hads, You know when you say the mother always knows? The mother always knows? Where does that come from? The mother has the sixth sense. That usually is ascribed to. Why? Because the love Allah has placed in the heart of the mother. And so the connection the mother has to the child. And so this is kind of like hads, right? Likewise, hads is also like where you have an epiphany. And you just know. You can't really explain, right? And so it's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's kind of similar to the fitrah, but a little bit different. It's not really the same. Fitrah is like an intuitive nature. There's two madhahib when it comes to fitrah, in terms of how we explain the fitrah. Both are from Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, right? One of them is generally ascribed to Ibn Abdul Barr, rahimahullah ta'ala, which and other A'immah, I believe Tahawi and others as well, which is that think of fitrah or knowledge of fitrah to be predisposed knowledge. It's kind of like it's kind of like knowledge that's in a zip file. Okay, knowledge in a zip file. When you're born, it's here, and then at a certain age, it just unlocks. Okay, The other madhab, and this is of other a'immah, such as Ad-Darimi and others, and I believe Shaykh Islam Taymiyyah as well, is that it's more like, think of it like a software, an operating software that runs in the back. Right? The moment you feed it enough information, it's going to start giving you those answers. Right? So like the moment you come to a little bit of awareness at the age of 7, 8, you'll be like, oh, okay, I know who my mother is, I know who my father is, you know, I know Allah exists, I have all this information now. How did I come to about it? It's just in the operating system. When enough knowledge came to me, I was able to now come to these conclusions. Right? So ala kulli hal, whichever one you take, it doesn't make a difference. Fitrah is the fitrah. It's just different ways of understanding it. It really doesn't make a difference. Funny enough, the modern worldview also affirms intuitions. Right? It also affirms intuitions. In fact, the biggest imam of modernity, the biggest philosopher of modernity is Kant by far. Right? He's the one who took the two schools, the two madhahib of, astaghfirullah. The point is, like, you know how Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah took the ways of Ahl al-Ra'i and Ahl al-Hadith, right? And you know, he became the Mujaddid, right? Kant, he takes the rationalist school and the empiricist school, and he's the one who provides modernity with its school of philosophy. And after that, khalas, the book of metaphysics was closed after Kant, and it never opened again after that, right? So within his philosophy, he kind of, the notion of his philosophy is that, look, the only thing that is available to us is our experience, our first person experience. The only thing that is available to us is our first person experience of the world. Of the world. So we don't have access to the world, we have access to our experience. Right? How do we know something to be right or not? Intuition. Right? And I'm very simplifying, and I could be very well wrong, because to read Kant properly is an entire life study, right? But the point is, this is effectively what he says, right? Now, these debates of does rationale take precedence or does the empirical take precedence are present within our turath as well, right? We know that Al-Razi and Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah and others were more empirical in nature. They gave more value to empirical, not denying the rational, but the value was more laid in towards the empirical. Then you have others that come earlier, such as Al-Juwayni and others, and Al-Amidi and others, that they incline towards the rational more than the empirical, right? So both back and forths have been there throughout history. But in Islam, they both hold weight. It's not that one becomes subservient to the other, right? That doesn't happen. And the other reason is why? Because wahi trumps all. And submission to Allah trumps all. So it doesn't, at the end of the day, these issues will not change. Ma qala Allah wa qala Rasul. Quran and Sunnah. It doesn't make a difference to us. Especially when it comes to understanding reason, purpose, etc. These things hold no weight for us. Then they just become philosophical debate at some point. Tayyib. With that, we're done. Very quickly. Revelation, no revelation. Sense experience, but in different ways, in different grammars, in different discursive grammars. Reason, we have reason, Islamic reasoning, and aql and qalb. They have secular reasoning, which is divorced from anything else, as if you can just have a cold, dumb interaction with the world. Reports, akhbar, it holds a lot of weight for us. For them, not so much. Fitrah, it holds a lot of central weight for us. For them, it holds weight, but not to the same level per se, depending. Right? Okay, with that, we're done, alhamdulillah, for today. We can open up now for questions. Al-Qadha, you had a question. So, if we come to the science of Musal Hadith, remember, the funun of istilahat, the science of technical terminology or conventional terminology, is something else, right? So, it's very important you ask these questions, which is what does khabar mean when we use it in a certain context. Over here, khabar was being used in a more loose usuli context, right? In the sense that, look, any transmission, right? While when we come to Mustal Hadith, now we start seeing differences. What's the difference between a khabar, between a athar, and between a hadith, right? Over there, that's Mustal Hadith. The differences over there are well known, right? Hadith is what the Prophet ﷺ said, did, or accepted, right? So it's quiet upon. Athar is, a general narration from either from the Sahaba, from the Salaf, or from any of the Aimma of the past. This is Athar, right? So it's more general tradition. And then Khabar is the most loosest, which is just a Khabar that doesn't necessarily even mean that it has a chain that goes all the way back. If somebody says Khabar, in the science of the Hadith, they're going to say, yeah, about that. No, just throw it away. We're not really going to even talk about its authenticity at this point. Mashi? Did you have your hand up first or did you? Mashi, fadal.
I have two questions, but before I even ask them, you will ask for someone to remind you about the correlation between ilm and understanding.
Yes, we did that already, right? So we did that. We spoke about, so Jazakallah khairan. We said that ilm and amal, and this was at the core of how knowledge today is about power. So secular knowledge is reframed in the course of secular power. And I don't want to get into it today because we're going to get into it a little bit more later. But for us, ilm and amal, if we don't have an understanding of practical and theoretical, we have praxis. What do we have? Praxis. Praxis is where our theoretical is our ethical and it is our practice. There's no distinguishing between these two. It's like if you had a graph, right? You have ilm, you have amal. These two do not exist without action, right? Upon the ethical, right? So you have to be on the graph somewhere. Does that make sense, right? For you to exist, right? So human beings need to be on the graph. Else the study of ilm is useless without the amal. Do you make sense? Does that make sense? So it's a praxis, right? So, okay, come back to the second one. We'll take his first.
So, on the topic of power and knowledge being power, how do we understand the push towards the knowledge of self and like self-understanding and coming to learn about yourself for the sake, or at least on the outwardly, it's shown to be for the sake of your own individual happiness as opposed to any power or struggle.
All right. So, inshallah, we'll get to it for the psychological, the study, the happiness of the self and finding the self. It's all shirkiyat. It all comes from other religions, from Buddhism, from all these other religions, and it's absolutely based upon this filth. And it's anti-Quran, anti-Sunnah in its essence. Right? Because for us, we find ourselves on the journey to God. Right? And on that journey, the path is to God. That's all that we're concerned with. And then in the periphery, we have dunya. Okay? And that's what shapes what it means to be me. Am I a sinner? I am a sinner. Am I working towards Allah? I'm trying. Am I on the path to Allah? I'm hoping to be there. That's why I'm asking Allah for guidance. Is the dunya something I need to live in? Yes, because I'm from the dunya. I'm here. But I need to use this dunya to be my path to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I only need to take what I need to take from it. That doesn't mean I can't get rich. But even if I get rich, it was for the sake of Allah. If it's not, then it's a curse. Right? So Allah in front of us, while the dunya is on, our side view mirrors. In today's world, it's the opposite. The entire path, everything about it is dunya. And you're walking this world as yourself. Okay? And yourself holds no meaning. It has no meaning because it's just dunya. There's no purpose. It's dumb, cold, blind. And you're just here. And then in that, you need to discover yourself because you have no true purpose. Right? And then if you want to have some sort of practice in religion, that's awesome, but it needs to be in your rear view. Because life is all about getting that money, being successful, having happiness in this world. Right? So no, and we'll get to it inshallah. We'll definitely, we'll spend maybe a lecture or two on it. Hopefully not more than that, just one lecture. And inshallah, so to show that it's just secular imamship. This whole self-help industry, this whole